Mr. Griffith is present with both of his lawyers. Mr. Levine is here for the state. Anything we need to take up?
Okay.
Ms. Thornhill?
Judge, Mr. Levine and I discussed yesterday some of the exhibits that I think might be coming in today, and I have objections to just two of them. I don't know when would be appropriate to address it.
Is it something that's lengthy argument?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and take care of it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what exhibit numbers they are.
It's going to be a couple of videos, Your Honor, that are relatively short. I can pull those out, Your Honor. They're going to be witnesses for later today.
Okay. And before I see them, what's the issue I'm looking for?
Hearsay. There's snippets that are taken out of a larger conversation. One of them is just Deputy Jankowski asking Kathy Griffith the domestic violence checklist questions. Has he ever strangled you before? Has he ever used a weapon against you before? It's just that, with no context at all. It is one of several clips that are coming in from that day. And then the second one is a female deputy, and I don't remember her name, talking to Kathy Griffith in the road after they've decided to take Collin to a Baker Act facility, and the officer explaining why they were taking him to the Baker Act facility despite her wanting him to stay with her. The deputy talks a lot about, I'm afraid he's going to kill you, things like that. Also hearsay.
Your Honor, we'll start with the first exhibit, which will be, for the record, 189.
And which one is that?
That's going to be the first one we were talking about.
Okay.
A couple of quick yes or no questions I almost forgot before we go. Has he ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a weapon?
Yes.
And has he ever threatened to kill you or your children? And do you think he's capable of killing you?
Yes.
Does he have access to a firearm?
No.
And
Probably not.
has he ever placed his hands or an object around your throat?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we leave? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time. A couple of quick yes or no questions. Almost.
Mr. Levine, as to the admissibility of that video.
Yes, sir. This comes from November 13th of 2023 at approximately 10:20 p.m. It's related to the domestic violence battery case that took place the same time. This is part of that subject matter, and this would be admissible, Your Honor, in the state of mind exception of the hearsay rule, because it goes directly to the victim's state of mind as it pertains to the defendant. And out-of-court statements are admissible under the state of mind exception if, one, the statement shows the declarant's future intent to perform an act that is at issue in the case, or two, the statement shows the declarant's state of mind when the statement was made, or at any other time when the state is when that state is an issue in the case. This is particularly true when the purported statements to a third party were made by a homicide victim. And then the case law goes on to hold, and this I'm reading from Kingery v. State, 523 Southern 2nd, 1199. It says, indeed, a homicide victim's purported statements to a third party have been deemed admissible only in three general categories in which the need for the statements appears to overcome the possible prejudice. These categories are: one, the defendant claims self-defense, which can be rebutted by the victim's statements that he feared the defendant, which that's right on point with what we have here. Or number two, the defendant claims the victim committed suicide, which can be rebutted by statements of the victim that are inconsistent with suicide, which would be relevant as well here. Number three, which is the third possibility, the defendant claims the victim's death was accidental, which can be rebutted by the victim's statements that he, or of course she, feared whatever the instrument of death proved to be. So I would say there's an argument for all three of them in this case, but if one is appropriate, then I would submit that it's supported by the case law and by 8033, the state of mind exception to the hearsay rule. So what do we hear? We've heard in opening statements and as part of the evidence in the defense of self-defense / accident / she was suicidal, all three of those things. So because of that, Your Honor, this is admissible evidence.
Thornhill?
And Judge, there's plenty of evidence coming in about Kathy's statements to police about being fearful, about what he allegedly did to her on November 13th. I'm not objecting to any of that as hearsay. I think it does provide context, but this is different for two reasons. One, it's an officer asking her specific questions about past events. Remember, this is happening November of 2023, so 10 months before the incident at issue here. And he's asking about past events. That, I think, is very different on a checklist. It's not her state of mind. He's asking, has this ever happened in the past? So I don't think it meets the state of mind exception. The second reason it concerns me is the checklist that the officer is holding in full view of the camera has other questions and answers that I think are irrelevant. And finally, a 403 argument that these specific questions regarding past instances, when there's plenty of other admissible evidence about their interactions, her fear of Collin, that I'm not objecting to.
Your Honor, I would point out it's not just past incidents. One of the most telling things, and the reason it would be admissible pursuant to the case law, the hearsay exception, is the deputy asked about the future, which is exactly what the case law and the state of mind exception is made for, not the past, but the future. And of course, in order to predict or think about the future, there has to be some discussion of the past or some reason to have that fear. And there's specific questions about has he threatened to kill you, or do you think he has the ability to kill you or will kill you? But she says yes. So that goes to the future, which is why it should be admissible.
So Ms. Thornhill, as to those particular statements that talk about, and I agree with you that statements about has this happened in the past, etc., that should be excluded. I also agree that the video portion that shows the checklist should be excluded. So I'm inclined to perhaps allow some of the audio. So what is your response to the questions that relate to her present state of mind? And
I don't have any further argument as to her statements about her fear of the future.
so I will grant your oral motion in limine in part. Mr. Levine, any statements that relate to present or future state of mind will be admissible, but only by audio. Any questions and answers related to past occurred events are excluded. So I don't know if you'll be able to get that editing done before you have the witness call, but if you need a moment to talk to your IT person, I can give that to you. But let's handle the other piece of evidence.
Well, Judge, I will say that because I don't think this was going to be admitted this morning, and the reason I brought it up now is so we could deal with it. I think that there's time for it to be edited. At least that's my understanding of the procedure we're following today.
What's the next piece?
Oh, the second one is the Kathy talking to the deputy.
Your Honor, that's going to be State Exhibit 194.
Yeah, you're on that.
What
Southern and White testimony will start forward with Catherine and Griffith.
what date is this exhibit from?
Your Honor, yeah, it's
I can't read it.
195.
This is one that I have no objection to.
Oh,
That one, the one that I was explaining, right?
Correct. That's the one where they go inside and
Here's 195. Your Honor, I said 194, but it's 195.
and what date was 195 from?
I can tell you that.
November 14th, 2023.
It's going to be from 8:20 in the morning.
We want what's right for him, but we also want,
I know
but we
you guys
have an
are
obligation to protect him
I understand.
and protect him. We have to protect both. Because even though he didn't threaten to harm himself, he threatened to harm his mom. And either way, that
I know, you beat the shit out of us.
Yeah.
I know.
And with all due respect, you can't have them here last night where you were fearful, and then 4 hours later, you're recording, because recording's not helping you. when he chokes you out. And what's the recording going to do? What's the recording? It's not bringing you back. You'll still be dead. You know, I'm not trying to make it sound like it's an easy task, man, because I'm sure it's a tough thing to do. But I struggle with a kid that's being released from jail and saying, if you bring me back there, she's going to die.
If we don't do something,
Shame on us.
Yeah, then we're not.
Shame on us that
then
we
we
did our
fail.
job and we failed you. And I'm not failing you. Nor am I going to fail your son.
Mr. Levine?
Your Honor, same arguments as it pertains to the state of mind exception, as well as excited utterance. You can clearly tell that she's emotional. She's under the stress of the situation. It's right on the heels of, granted, it's the next morning after the domestic violence battery, but it was pretty much an all-night affair in terms of the investigation and then the body cam footage and the in-car footage going through to the early hours of the morning. So I would argue under the state of mind exception, with her responses to what the deputies are saying, as well as her visible emotions and her excited utterance regarding that the defendant beat the shit out of her or something to that effect, and her agreeing with the deputies regarding her, she should be concerned and is concerned about the future violence that he will perpetrate on her. So I would argue that that's admissible as well, Your Honor.
Judge, this was many, many, many hours after the domestic violence battery incident. Collin had gone to the jail. As I indicated in opening, he had been released from the jail. This was after his mom brought him home, and deputies were called by jail personnel to go check. So excited utterance regarding the domestic violence battery situation, I think, is a little bit of a stretch since it was hours later. But additionally, I mean, an excited utterance about her son being gay corrected because he threatened her. I don't know that that's what's established here. The second thing is that most of this is the deputy offering her opinions about what might happen, and I understand Kathy Griffith saying, I know, I get it, but it's testimony from an officer that is improper.
Anything additional, Mr. Levine?
I would say it's not testimony from an officer, and it's in the context of Kathy's responses, both visibly, emotionally, crying, putting her hands over her face like an acknowledgement, and then her saying, I know. So that's critical to her statements making sense in the context of what precedes them, what the deputies say. She can either agree, when I say she, Kathy could either agree, disagree, or whatnot, but you can tell what her response is as it pertains to, in relationship to what the deputies are saying and her responses.
I'm going to grant your motion. 195 is excluded. Any other evidentiary issues we need to take up right now? Mr. Levine?
No.
All right. We're ready.
Could I have just 1 minute to put this back in order, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
You may be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Again, thank you for your continued service in this case. Mr. Levine?
Thank you, Your Honor. State calls forensic investigator Brandy Bainge.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Investigator Bainge. May you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your names for the record?
It's Brandy Bainge, BrandyBange,
And where are you employed?
at the Polk County Sheriff's Office.
What's your position?
I am a forensic investigator.
Tell the jury about what that means.
We respond to different types of calls for service, and we generally just document the scene, collect evidence, and write reports.
How many years have you been employed with the Sheriff's Office?
11 years.
And tell the jury about your education and training and experience.
I have a bachelor's degree from USF. I have a certificate in crime scene from Hillsborough Community College. And then we have 800 hours of on-the-job training, as well as continuing education.
Do you have any estimation about how many scenes you've been to during your career?
I don't know.
Is it in the hundreds?
Probably yes.
Or 100 or more?
Yes, yes.
Now, during your career, have you responded to countless homicide scenes
Yes.
and scenes of violent crimes?
Yes.
All right, now, Investigator Bainge, directing your attention to Sunday, September 8, 2024, around 7:22 in the evening. Did you respond to the crime scene in this case?
I did.
And tell the jury about when you got there, what was your focus on?
So when we first get to a crime scene, we want to document it the way it is when we get there. So we generally take video and photographs at that time.
Are you one of the more senior forensic investigators that responded to the scene?
Yes.
Earlier, the jury heard from Investigator Ellis. Was she also there performing multiple things along with you?
Yes, she was.
Now, did you have an opportunity to see the outside of the scene as well as the inside of the scene?
Yes.
And what caught your attention about, as you proceeded into the house and made it back to the kitchen, what caught your attention at the crime scene that was of note?
So on the outside of the house, there was an AirPod that was on the ground, like in the mulch area in front of the house. And then there was some blood on one of the steps. And then going into the house, there was another AirPod, or earbud, I should say, on the floor. And then an AirPod case, and then a knife. So it kind of was in a line from outside to inside.
As if something started outside and continued inside?
Yes.
Now, did you have an opportunity to walk further into the kitchen and see the victim?
Yes.
And were you able to see firsthand the wound that she suffered?
Yes.
Tell the jury about what you saw and what that meant to you.
She had an apparent stab wound on her neck. It was a very deep wound.
Have you been to multiple scenes where people have been stabbed?
Yes.
And the injury that you saw and the scene that you saw, was it consistent with somebody being attacked and stabbed?
Yes.
Now, as the scene was documented, and photographs are taken, of course, does somebody video record the scene as well?
Yes.
And it sounds pretty self-explanatory, but explain to the jury what you did to accomplish that.
So we just have a regular video camera, just like you would imagine. We go and do the outside of the house, and then we go inside the house and do the interior of the house.
And I take it you did that in this case?
I did.
Have you had an opportunity to previously see State's Exhibit 166, the crime scene video?
Yes.
And does it fairly and accurately depict the scene as you saw it on that night?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the State would move 166 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
It is received.
Now, do you recall, when did you first see the defendant at the scene that night?
It was after 11 o'clock. I can give you the exact time if you need it.
Well, that's all right.
Okay.
But it was after 11 o'clock?
Yes.
Now, as to what the defendant was doing before that, do you know or do you not know?
I don't know.
Where did you first see the defendant?
We have a crime scene trailer there on scene that we usually bring on scene, so it was out in the roadway, parked out in the roadway. And he was brought on the trailer, and then I came onto the trailer.
Describe that crime scene trailer.
It's almost kind of like an RV, but it's made to be more specific to what we do.
And what can you accomplish inside of it?
We take photographs. We have we have processing, fuming processing for fingerprints. We have all different kinds of stuff, supplies. We have that kind of thing on the trailer.
So is it fairly common to bring a suspect into that in order to photograph them and accomplish those other tasks you mentioned?
Yes.
Have you been to crime scenes where family members or spouses are present and their loved ones have been injured or killed?
Yes.
And how do they usually act?
Judge, I'm going to object to relevance.
When you came into contact with the defendant, how would you describe his demeanor?
He was emotionless.
Emotionless?
Yes.
Did that change at all while you interacted with him?
No.
Did that surprise you?
Objection, relevance.
Now, describe to the jury, what was your interaction with the defendant like? What did you do?
So I photographed him, and I obtained some blood swabs that we had seen on him from apparent blood that he had on him.
Judge, I'm sorry, I can't hear very well.
You could speak up just a little
I'm
bit.
sorry.
Thank you.
So
If you could answer that question again, please.
yes, so I obtained some blood swabs that were on him. He had some blood on him. I obtained fingernail swabbings from him, and I obtained buccal swabs from him.
Starting with, where were the visible parts of his body and or clothing that you saw blood?
So he had blood on his ear, on the right ear, on the right arm of his glasses, like right here. He had blood on his fingernails. He had blood on his shoes, and some apparent blood on his shorts.
Were you present when somebody from Polk County Fire Rescue washed off blood off of his arms and hands?
No,
So your photographs would have been after that, is that correct?
I believe so, because I didn't see fire EMS, I don't think.
Okay. Do they usually leave the scene after they tend to a victim?
Usually, yes.
And there was a description of that there was blood on from his like elbow to his forearm and on his hands, and that was washed off. Did you see blood on his forearms and his hands to a great extent?
No, I did not.
All right. What did you mention about the fingernails, the swabbings?
Yes.
Tell the jury about what you do to accomplish the swabbings.
So he had some apparent blood on his fingernails, and we take a cotton swab, and sometimes we moisten it with some distilled water to loosen it up, and then swab all around the areas of the fingernails.
Now, his hands weren't bleeding, correct?
No.
I'm sorry, I kind of asked that question confusing. Were his hands bleeding?
No.
So did it appear that any blood on his hands would have been from his mother, correct?
Yes.
Objection.
Now,
Sustained.
in terms of the
I
buckle
move to strike
swabs,
that answer.
Sustained. You'll disregard the last answer, members of the jury.
in terms of the buckle swabs, if you could explain to the jury what buckle swabs are and how you accomplish those.
So we do that the same way. We use a cotton swab, and we just swab the inside of a person's cheek. We do the left cheek and the right cheek.
What's the purpose of that?
Usually it's for DNA purposes.
Is their agency then able to send those buccal swabs from the defendant or from somebody else or a DNA sample off to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement lab for them to do any DNA comparison or analysis that they want to do?
Yes.
So when the defendant was in the crime scene truck, were you able to take photographs?
Yes.
And have you had an opportunity to see those photographs at the state attorney's office? Those are numbers 100 through 124?
Yes.
And do those appear to accurately depict the photographs that you took?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move 100 through 124 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
They are received.
Did you also take some photographs of the defendant's clothing and shoes?
I did.
And what was the purpose of that?
Just to document anything that I found on the clothing and just to show how it was that day.
And did you have an opportunity to see State Exhibits 156 through 169, indicating the pictures of some of the clothing and
Yes,
shoes?
I have seen the pictures, yes.
I'm sorry, I still can't hear very well.
I'm sorry. Yes, I have seen them.
Your Honor, the state would move 156 to 169, the pictures of the clothing and shoes and evidence.
Any objection?
No, but I have a question about the numbering. I have 156 to 164 are photos, and 165 is the 911 call.
No, you're correct.
is
So
the-
what did it exhibit?
I'm sorry, I couldn't read my own writing, Your Honor. It's 156 to 164.
Any objection to those?
No, sir.
All right, the others are not received beyond 164, but states 156 through 164 are received.
Thank you. Investigator Baines, in terms of the defendant's shoes, was he wearing shoes?
Yes, he had on a pair of black tennis shoes.
And did you see blood on his shoes?
Yes, he did have a pair of blood on his shoes.
What about his shorts? Was he wearing black, like basketball shorts?
Yes.
And did he have any blood visible on his shorts?
Yes, there was some apparent blood on the shorts.
Where was it? Do you recall, front or back?
It was on the front.
And then did he have a shirt on?
No, he was not wearing a shirt.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, the state would publish the photographs of the defendant.
You may.
Thank you. Number 100, that's the defendant.
Yes.
101.
That's a side profile of him.
And if you look on is it on your monitor too?
Yes.
And if you see where I'm pointing, is that what would appear to be some blood on his glasses?
Yes.
So you know that mouse allows you to point as well if you need
Okay.
Well, that would be good. If you could point out to the jury about the blood.
Right here and here.
Moving on to 102,
This is the back of his head.
103.
This is the front of his entire body.
Now, it's a fair statement. He's pretty tall, maybe 6'2" or so.
I'm not sure how tall he is, but he's taller than I am, yes.
104,
Yes, this is just a closer up of his top half of his body.
105,
A side profile of his whole body.
106.
This is the lower half of his body side profile.
I think that's 107, I'm sorry. 108,
This is the back of his whole body.
109,
This is another side profile of his whole body.
110,
This is a mid-range of his arm, his left arm.
111.
This is a picture of his shoe, his left shoe.
And going back to 110, were there some apparent marks on his arms?
Yes, there were.
And any idea how those marks got there?
I don't know.
Or when they got there?
I don't know.
111? As you mentioned, the blood on the shoes?
Yes, this is the shoe with the apparent blood.
And could you, for the jury's benefit, point with that red arrow where you see blood?
Sure. So there's apparent blood in this area here, and then there's more apparent blood here, and then there's some here, and you can see a little bit here. It's light, but you can see it, and then it's on the bottom here.
112?
This is his left leg.
And tell us about that mark on his below his knee.
It's an apparent laceration.
113? Is that the back of his leg? What were you highlighting there?
Yes, it was like an apparent abrasion.
114?
That's a close-up of the apparent abrasion.
115?
This is his right forearm.
Were there marks on his right forearm too?
Yes.
Were there multiple marks on both of his arms?
Yes.
Did they look like super fresh, like they had just happened?
They looked fresh
And when you say fresh, like how fresh?
in the last day.
Were you able to tell how those marks were caused?
No.
116?
This is his right forearm, and there's some apparent lacerations on the top of his forearm.
117?
That's his left forearm, and you can see the abrasion or the apparent lacerations.
Have you been at scenes where you've seen people that have cut themselves or marked themselves?
Sustained.
118?
This is the palm of his hand. This is his other palm.
And is it a fair statement he has no defensive wounds on his hands?
Objection is to the characterization of the
Sustained.
Is it a fair statement that he has no wounds on his hands at all?
Right, I did not see any wounds on his hands.
Going back to 118, so that's 118 and 119.
Yes.
Besides just his hands having no marks on them, did you also get pictures? Well, I guess you did. Pictures of the back of his hands, 120
Yes, the tops of his hands, yes.
and 121.
Yes, this is a close-up of his fingernails.
Going back to 120, did he have any knife cuts or wounds on the top of his hands?
No.
What about, neither in 121, is that correct?
No, I do not see any.
And then 123,
This is apparent blood that was on his ear.
oh, I'm sorry, let me go back to that.
Yeah.
I can't really see that.
It's
but
very
can you point it?
small, but it's right here. This is the area that I swabbed.
And then finally, 124.
This is a close-up of the apparent blood on the glasses, the right arm of the glasses, and you can see a little bit better now in this picture. There's apparent blood here, here, and I think right here.
All right, now we're going to go to 156, please. All right, 156 appears to be a close-up of something. Tell us what that is.
This is the short, sorry, there's a little bit of a glare. I'm going to move in.
Is
This-
that
You can adjust that if
Okay.
you need to.
There we go, that's better. This is the shorts that he was wearing. This is a close-up photo of the front of his shorts. You can see some apparent blood in the picture. It's kind of hard to see. I can point to it if you need me to.
please?
Okay. Sorry. So this area right here, and then there's a little more here.
All right, we move on to 158, the shoes, 159, 160, 161. Could you point to the blood in 161?
Yes, there's apparent blood here, apparent blood here, here, and then all down here on the bottoms of the shoes here in this whole area right here.
162. Is there any blood there?
Yes, right here, 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 and then this area here.
163.
There's apparent blood right here by the laces, this area.
And 164.
There's apparent blood right there.
Investigator Baines, we're going to move on now. Approximately how many minutes do you think that you were with the defendant?
Probably about 20 to 30 minutes.
During those 20 to 30 minutes, did his demeanor change from being emotionless at all?
No, he remained the same.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to publish State Exhibit 166, the crime scene video.
It's been received.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Has it been received?
It has, Your Honor.
Any objection to publication at this time?
No, sir.
You may.
further questions.
Cross?
Good morning.
Investigator Bange, the blood on the step that you pointed out to the jury, that was never tested, correct?
I don't know.
So you're not aware of it being
I'm
tested?
not aware of it.
And you don't know when that blood was deposited there, do you?
No, I don't.
In fact, you said you didn't arrive until many hours after the incident, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, because the 911 call came in at about 6:10 p.m.
We arrived on scene, but I didn't go into the residence until much later, yes.
When you arrived on scene, do you remember what time it was? You may have already said. I'm sorry if I didn't.
I can look at my report. I believe it was around. I got there at 7:22.
So over an hour after the 911 call came in.
Yes.
Colin was already outside of the house when you arrived?
He was not inside the house. I don't know where he was.
And EMS had already, or Polk County Fire Rescue had already been to the house, been inside the house, stomped around, did life-saving actions, and then left, correct?
Yes, I believe they went into the house, from my knowledge, yes.
You also said that Colin, at some point you're aware, had blood on his forearms and hands.
Yes.
How did you become aware of that?
Just now in court.
Oh, okay, so you weren't aware before.
That he had blood on his arms prior? No. I did know about the fingernails. He had blood on his fingernails.
Right. I was talking about the arms and hands. And he could have dripped blood on his way out of the house when he was escorted by law enforcement, correct?
I don't know.
But it's possible.
It's possible, yes.
The blood that you pointed out on Colin's fingernails and his glasses and his right ear, you're aware that Colin did several things at the instruction of the 911 operator, correct?
I don't know. I do know that they sometimes give instructions, but I have not heard this call.
So let me ask you this. If the 911 operator had told Colin to get towels or something to absorb blood and place it on Kathy's neck, and he did that, he could have gotten blood on his fingernails that way, correct?
Yes, that's possible, yes.
And there was, in fact, a bloody towel by her neck when you entered the scene.
Yes.
And you're aware that he also did, well, maybe not. If the 911 operator had instructed him to kneel and do CPR on Kathy, and he did that, that could explain how he got blood on various parts of his body, right?
It's possible, yes.
And if the 911 operator had instructed Colin to get the knife far away from him, he could have gotten blood on his hands that way as well.
Yes.
And the knife was, in fact, far away from where Kathy Griffith was laying, correct?
It was in the same room, but yes, it was not right near her.
You said that, oh, well, let me go back to the blood. You don't know if Colin, in his obeying the instructions of this 911 operator, came in contact with the blood that was everywhere as he's tending to his mother. Maybe at one point he had blood on his hands and adjusted his glasses?
I don't know.
But it's possible, right?
It's possible.
The blood on the bottom of the flip-flop, you didn't really talk about that. You talked mostly about the blood on the shoes that were collected from Colin. But there was, in fact, blood on the bottom of one of the flip-flops that was laying in the kitchen.
Yes, I believe there was.
And finally, you said that Colin was emotionless when you dealt with him. You're aware that people can go into shock sometimes from a traumatic event?
Sure.
So that's one possibility here, too.
Of course, I'm not a doctor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Redirect.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Is the witness released?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Thornhill?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I forgot I do have one other question.
You may.
I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
The photo of Colin from inside the trailer, there's a mark on his torso about midway between chest and hip.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
That corresponds with a slit in his shirt, doesn't it?
There was a slit in the shirt.
In the torso area.
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Any redirect now, Mr. Levine?
No, thank you.
She's still free to go.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next witness.
Your Honor, the state will call forensic investigator Michelle Peters.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Peters, may you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, sir. My name is Michelle Peters. I work with Polk County Sheriff's Office in the Forensics Unit.
How long have you been employed with the Sheriff's Office?
Approximately 20 years.
Now, let's talk about specifically in this case, did you have an opportunity to go to the medical examiner's office?
I did.
And what takes place at the medical examiner's office as it pertains to the homicide cases?
A post-mortem examination of the body, which is actually called an autopsy in layman's terms. And they examine the body and we take photographs and collect evidence.
Now, when you take photographs, does that give us a frozen-in-time picture of what the victim looked like? Any injuries or markings, anything of that nature?
Yes, sir.
And what evidence do you collect from an autopsy?
Standard autopsies, we take head hair samples, we take ink impressions, which are fingerprint impressions, and we take a red top and a purple top blood tube. And then we take, depending on the case, we will take fingernail swabbings or clippings. We can take clothing, any weapons that may be present.
All right. Now, in this particular case, were you able to take blood samples from Kathy Griffith?
We did.
And is the purpose of that so that it could be sent off to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for DNA analysis?
Yes, sir, further testing.
Now, in this particular case, did you have an opportunity to see a series of photographs, State Exhibit 125 through 155?
I did.
And are those autopsy photographs taken of Kathy Griffith?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what date it was that you actually went to the medical examiner's office?
I'd refer to my report.
Yes, ma'am.
It was September 9th of 2024.
So it's September 8th, 2024 was a Sunday. You went Monday morning, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I'll go by your word.
What was the time that you were there?
I arrived at the medical examiner's office at 7 in the morning.
And is that common for an autopsy to be performed the day after a homicide?
Yes, sir.
Did Assistant Medical Examiner Dr. Garavan perform the autopsy?
He did.
And were you present for that?
I was.
Your Honor, at this time, the State would move State Exhibits 125 to 155 in evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
They're received.
With permission from the court, may I publish the photos? Thank you. All right, that talks about the time and the date and where you are. Moving on with the autopsy photographs. Is that Kathy Griffith as she's transported to the medical examiner's office?
Yes, sir.
And victims typically transported in a body bag of some type?
Yes, sir.
127, 128. Some identified information about Kathy Griffith. Does that say she was 39 years old?
It does, yes, sir.
She weighed 126 pounds.
Yes, sir.
Did you have an opportunity to personally see the stab wound?
I did.
Is it a fair statement that it was a wide open, gaping wound?
Yes, sir.
Continuing on with 133. Were you able to see where the knife actually exited the other side of her neck?
Yes, sir.
134. Is that a close-up of where the tip of the knife went through her neck and out the other side?
Yes, sir.
And that pointer, or the metal rod that's going in through the entry wound of the knife wound and transects through her neck and goes out the back left side of her neck, who put that there?
Dr. Garavan.
And is that able to show the pathway of the wound?
Yes, sir.
And they can do that for like a knife wound or a gunshot wound? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
One being the entry wound and one being the exit wound?
Yes, sir.
Now, 137, as part of the autopsy, does the doctor sometimes remove parts of the internal organs that he or she feels is important?
Yes, sir.
And does this the metal pipe that goes through the esophagus and or trachea, was that done by the associate medical examiner, Dr. Iravan?
It was.
And does it also show the pathway of the wound?
Yes, sir.
Next, we have 138. Did you notice a wound on Kathy's right hand in the webbing of her fingers between her thumb and pointer finger?
I did.
138. 139. And is it a fair statement that's not like a little paper cut or a little straight line, but it was an open wound?
Yes, sir.
140. Next, we move to 141. Did Kathy have a number of scrapes and bruises on her limbs, her arms and legs?
On her whole body, yes, sir.
On what?
On her whole body, yes, sir.
141, does that show some of those on her left arm and elbow?
Yes, sir.
142, is that a close-up of some of the bruising and scrapes and whatnot?
Yes, sir.
143, does that show some prominent bruising on her left wrist?
Yes, sir.
So some marks or bruising on the inside of her forearm as well?
Yes, sir.
Now moving to her right arm, did there appear to be some bruising on her right arm?
Yes, sir.
And going to her hands, was there some bruising on her hands
Yes, sir.
and her fingers?
Yes, sir.
That's 148. Were there some marks or cuts or bruises on her legs?
Yes, sir.
149. Is that a close-up of one of those?
Yes, sir.
150. Some bruising apparent on her shins or the front of her legs as well?
Yes, sir.
$152, $153, $154, and $155. All right, Investigator Peters, I don't have any other questions for you.
Investigator Peters, some of the bruises that the jury saw in those pictures were different colors.
Yes,
right? And you have no way of knowing when those bruises got on Ms. Griffith's body, do you?
No, ma'am.
It could have been days old.
Could have been.
Do you know how much blood Kathy Griffith lost?
I do not.
And the weighing that resulted in 126 pounds, that was done after she had passed away and lost blood, correct?
Correct. That was at the examiner's office.
Thank you.
Thank you. Redirect.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Is the witness released?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you. Next witness.
Your Honor, State College Sergeant Michael Schneider.
Sergeant Michael Schneider.
Stand right here, raise your right hand for the public story.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Put your step up there.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Levine, may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Sergeant. May you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your name for the record?
My name is Sergeant Michael Schneider, Schneider. I'm currently employed with the Florida Southwestern State College in Fort Myers.
And tell the jury a little bit about what that entails.
I am basically responsible for the security of the college, managing my crew, and a lot of it is community policing as well.
And how many fellow officers do you supervise?
Currently, I have a crew of 14.
Tell the jury about your education and training experience in law enforcement.
So I went to the academy. Backing up, I have an associate's degree in AS. I went to the academy in 2010, worked for the Fort Myers Police Department from 2011 to January 22. I left there, basically retired due to age, took a small hiatus, and then I started out with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, and I left there in November the prior year, and I've been at the FSW Police Department since December of 23.
Approximately how many years in law enforcement do you have?
It was about 14 now.
And you mentioned your degree, and you said some initials. What does that stand for?
An associated science degree. It's in the automotive field. I used to be an auto mechanic a long time ago.
Okay. All right, Sergeant Snyder. So the time frame I want to ask you about is very specific, going back to the year 2023 in September of 2023. At that time, were you employed by the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir, I was.
And what was your position at that time?
I was working as deputy in road patrol.
Now, when you're deputy on road patrol, does that mean you can see anything and everything and respond to countless different types of situations?
Yes, you basically you listen to the radio and see what's going on. If there's another one of your fellow deputies has a call that you might need help, and we also have a screen on the laptop that shows what calls are basically in service currently and which ones are holding.
And is Port Charlotte, is that in Charlotte County as well?
Yes, it's on the north side of the Peace River.
All right, I want to direct your attention to approximately 6:30 p.m. Were you dispatched to a certain location in Punta Gorda, Florida?
Yes, I was.
And where were you dispatched to?
It is called CSU. It's the Crisis Stabilization Unit of Charlotte Behavioral Center.
And what happens there?
This is usually where we bring critical Baker Acts.
Now, in this particular case, how was it that you responded to that location?
I was dispatched there. The call notes had said that I need to be there for a release of a potentially violent patient.
And did that end up being the defendant, Collin Griffith?
Oh, yes, it did.
Did you see the defendant back on the evening of September 19th of 2023?
I did.
Describe to the jury, when you pull up to the facility, where do you go? Do you stay in your car? Do you go inside? To tell them the process.
No, you don't go inside. You basically come in. It's kind of like a U-turn. You park under the portico. There's room for about 2 vehicles. I was on the left-hand side, and the entry doors are on the right, double doors. And when I got there was nobody there yet.
What is the purpose of you being there?
Basically providing a security escort. Somebody had a concern. I forgot who the initial complainant was on the call, but they had a concern that the patient that is to be released might has violent tendencies or might act out.
And if the release goes like smoothly and according to plan, what should have happened that evening? Like when the defendant comes out, what's he supposed to do, or where's he supposed to go?
Basically, when he's released, or any patient gets released from the facility, to go with whoever picks him up and leaves.
Now, did that happen in this case?
No, they did not.
Describe to the jury when you first saw the defendant. What happened?
So I was standing there, standing by my car on the left-hand side, and you can see into the facility, and people were starting to walk out. And when the doors opened, the young man came straight up to me and approached me and said I needed to be Baker acted.
Were you surprised to hear that?
Oh, yeah, because that is usually people want to leave.
Now, how would you describe his demeanor when he said that?
He was focused. He had a goal, for sure. He was somebody on a mission. He looked at me and said, I need to be Baker acted.
Were you in a marked vehicle?
Yes, sir.
And take it you had your marked uniform on?
Yes, sir.
Did you ask him why he said that?
Yes, I did, because it's unusual. He said, I need to be Baker acted because I'm either going to go kill myself and he said his mother.
What did he say about his mother?
He said he was going to either kill himself or his mother. He didn't name her by name, but he said it's either his mom or his mother.
When the defendant said he was either going to kill himself or his mom, were you surprised?
Yes, definitely.
Well, did you ask him any questions or respond in any way?
Usually when people do that, they have some sort of motive, and so I asked him, so how are you going to do that? And he stated, I'll find a way. I'll find a way. He named numerous methods, but unfortunately I didn't write them down, and so I don't recollect that, but there were several ways he was going to do that, and it was significant what he said.
Now, when he named the different manners in which he could kill his mom, was it like direct things that he could do to kill her? Kill a person?
Yes, I don't remember quite exactly specifically what it was, but each one of those methods that he mentioned would definitely lead to death, for sure.
After he said these things, what did you do?
We stood by the door with him, just kind of keeping an eye on him while other people were conferring what to do with him. I believe Deputy Welch was with me. They're from the Irish team. I believe that she took over the secondary Baker Act. This is definitely a liability at this point. So,
At that point, when the defendant says the direct things that he's going to do, is he a danger to himself and to his mom and perhaps anyone else he wants to kill?
yes.
You mentioned Deputy Welch. Is that Deputy Kerry Welch, also with the Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned the term, the Irish team?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
They are called for critical care or anybody who's in mental crisis. They're specially trained. I don't know exactly what the Irish stands for anymore.
And was the defendant insistent that he needed to be Baker acted because he would hurt himself or his mom or kill himself or his mom?
Yeah, he did not want to go. He basically stated that so he wouldn't have to leave.
So after you were concerned about his own safety and his mom's safety, what was the end result with what happened to the defendant?
He was readmitted to the facility as a Baker Act.
Did that conclude your involvement with the defendant that evening?
Yes, sir.
All right, Sergeant Snyder, I don't have any further questions.
Sergeant Snyder, you weren't involved in the initial reason that Collin Baker was placed in Charlotte Behavioral Health, were you?
No, ma'am.
So you have no knowledge of what led to him being there?
No, ma'am, I do not.
And are you aware that Collin had been trying not to get released from that facility under his Baker Act before you were alerted and told to go there?
No, not until he told me.
Okay. And are you aware that his mother had done everything she could to get him released from that Baker Act?
No, I did not have any background information at that point. All I knew was potentially violent.
Are you aware now that his mother did everything she could to get him out of the Baker Act facility leading up to your interactions with Collin on September 19th, 2023?
I did not follow any of that, ma'am.
And are you aware that the staff at Charlotte Behavioral Health was insisting on releasing him to his mother on September 19th, 2023?
That I do not recall. I know his grandmother was, I think his grandmother was there to get him.
And you don't know what Collin had said to any of the people who were trying to make him go home before you got there, correct?
No, ma'am.
And basically Collin told you, I would rather go back into this facility than be sent home.
He didn't specifically say that. He said he wanted to be Baker Acted. He
Did not want to go home.
Apparently, yes.
Did he ever tell you he didn't feel safe at home?
I don't recall that.
He might have said that, but you didn't write it down, or you don't remember?
I don't know. What I remember is on the short notes.
Did you make those short notes?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's entirely possible Collin told you that I'm afraid my mom will do something to me and I will kill her.
I probably would have remembered that.
But you're not sure?
No, ma'am.
And you have no idea if he had said that 1, 10, 1,000 times in the hours leading up to your interactions with him?
No, I wasn't there with him. I only had a short interaction during the time.
But you said he was focused on getting readmitted to the Baker Act facility.
That's what the end goal appeared to be.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Nothing further.
Is the witness released?
He is
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Say we call Deputy Alexander Sharp.
Stand right here, raise your right hand, sworn in by the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Yes, ma'am.
This way, please.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Deputy Sharp. May you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deputy Sharp. I work in the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
Your first name, sir?
Alexander, sir.
Tell the jury about your education, military experience, and law enforcement experience.
Sure. Okay. So, education. I went to technical college for automotive. I graduated high school from the Academy in Charlotte County. I have spent 4 years in the United States Marine Corps as an infantryman. I've also spent 3 years in the Fort Army National Guard as an infantryman as well. And I've worked for the Sheriff's Office in Charlotte County for about 2.5 years.
Now, at the Sheriff's Office in Charlotte County, what's your position and what are your responsibilities?
So I am currently a road patrol deputy assigned to District 1. Responsibilities are handling calls for service, traffic enforcement, and assisting other specialty units as needed.
Deputy, I want to direct your attention to November 13th of 2023. Did you respond to a house in Port Charlotte in your jurisdiction?
Yes, sir.
And what type of call was that you received?
I responded to a call for domestic violence between a mother and her son.
Do you recall the general neighborhood? Was it single-family houses?
Yes, sir. It was a neighborhood of single-family houses in a residential zone of Port Charlotte.
When you arrived, what did you do first?
Well, when I first arrived, I made contact with the supervisor deputy, Corporal Moore, who had gotten on scene prior to myself, and the deputy who was my trainer at the time. During the time that this happened, I was still in PTO training as a deputy.
And who was your field training officer?
My field training officer was Deputy First Class Jankowski.
And you mentioned Corporal Moore. Is that Corporal Joella Moore?
Yes, sir, it is.
Was she aware of the defendant and his mom?
In what regard, sir?
Like, did she give, without telling us anything she might have said, did she give you any background of the family dynamics or the parties?
No, sir. I was just aware that this was a domestic incident between a mother and her son. There was no other context given.
So you had no prior opinions about any of the parties involved, is that correct?
Correct, sir. I had never met either one of them before, nor did I know anything about them or any other history.
What did you do next, Deputy?
The next thing that I did is I went to go and make contact, I believe, with the individual and his mother to try and start gathering information, and his grandmother, who was there as well.
And what was the defendant's demeanor like?
I would say calm and collected.
And when you made contact with him, were you inside the house or outside the house?
I believe I was outside the house when I made contact with him, as he had left the residence initially when we had gotten there, and then ended up coming back.
Now, did you have an opportunity to talk to him?
The defendant?
Correct.
Yes, I did speak with him.
Did you have an opportunity to speak to his mom, Kathy Griffith?
Yes, sir.
And what was her demeanor like?
She seemed nervous, quiet, scared. From what I could tell, just her whole demeanor, she was still kind of just processing what was going on. Definitely seemed teary-eyed, if you will.
When you say scared, did she appear to be scared of you or scared of what her son had just done to her?
She appeared to be scared of her son, as she had some injuries that were documented and photographed.
And what were those injuries that she suffered from her son?
She's had some redness and what appears to be the beginning of bruising and swelling on her stomach and abdomen area, as she had stated that he had kneed her in the stomach. And then she also had a small scrape with some dirt on it on her hand, as she said that he had taken his foot and kicked or stomped her hand.
Did she tell you why he did that to his own mom?
So, speaking with both the mother and the son, what we were able to gather was that she had told him that she was unhappy with his behavior at the time as a juvenile and was going to do some new parenting and wanted to take away his Xbox gaming system and his cell phone. And at the time, he did not like those consequences, so he grabbed his mom and threw her on the ground after kneeing her and then stepping on her hand when she went to get her cell phone.
Now, was there another lady there, the grandmother of the defendant and the mother of the victim?
Yes, sir. So the defendant's grandmother and the victim's mother was also present at the house as they were eating dinner together that night.
So they were having a family evening, the grandma, her daughter, and the victim's son, correct?
Correct. Those three individuals were the three people in the home that night.
And did you have an opportunity to speak to the grandma as well?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did her statement corroborate what her daughter was saying?
Yes, the grandmother's statement that she provided to myself and Deputy Jankowski was consistent with the statement given by the mother and the victim. Basically, they stated the exact same thing, that they were having dinner, and she told him that she was going to take some things away for disciplinary reasons, and pretty much gave the exact course of events the same.
Now, did you see any marks or bruises or injuries on the defendant?
On the defendant, we did not see any marks, injuries, or bruising on him at all.
Now, did EMS respond, or something like EMS, whether it was the fire department or EMS, respond to treat the mother?
Honestly, sir, I do not recall.
What happened? How was that case resolved that night? Who got arrested?
That night, Collin was placed under arrest for domestic violence against his mother for battery by strike.
And was he transported to the proper location and thereafter?
Yes, sir. He was transported to the Charlotte County Jail afterwards.
Was the mom or the grandmother arrested for anything?
No, the mother and the grandmother were not arrested.
Now, in addition to you and Deputy Jankowski, you mentioned Corporal Moore. Were there any additional law enforcement there you can recall?
I cannot recall.
Is it a fair statement that the three of you were doing multiple, multiple things, and were each doing your own part of the investigation, and not necessarily all three of you together at the same time?
Correct. We were all doing different things together. I was going and getting paperwork at different times to provide the victim, such as Marcy's Law paperwork, as well as victims' rights forms and things like that, while other deputies were doing other tasks on the scene at the same time.
Now, when you went to get that paperwork, you mentioned victims' rights and Marcy's Law. Did you or one of your fellow deputies provide that to the victim, Kathy Griffith?
Yes, sir. Yes,
what does that mean? What type of paperwork is that when you say Marcy's Law and victim rights pamphlet?
So Marcy's Law is paperwork that advises victims of what their rights are in the state of Florida as a victim, so that way that they know that they have the right to go to different types of trials and hearings, and then different paperwork to let them know if they want to know when the person that was arrested for battering them or whatever crime may be is released from the jail and things of that nature.
Without, okay. And then, whether it's you or Deputy Jankowski or someone else, is that explained to the victim, Kathy Griffith, and certain questions asked and answers given?
Yes, sir.
If I may have a brief moment, Your Honor. When the victim, Miss Kathy, was sitting on the couch, how would you describe her demeanor?
I remember that I had asked her if I could get her an ice pack or anything like that, as she said that, the injuries that she had was sore, offered to help if I could. I was trying to be, as compassionate as I could be in that type of a situation. She just was very kind of closed off, if you will, and scared. She had advised me at one point that she no longer wanted Collin living with her or her mother, as she was honestly afraid of him.
Deputy Sharp, I have no further questions.
Cross?
Deputy Sharp, in your direct testimony, you made it sound like Collin fled the scene of what happened at his mother's house. But that's not really true, is it? He was the one who called 911.
Okay.
You don't remember that?
I don't recall exactly who the caller was. I know that I responded to the scene, though, ma'am.
Are you aware now that Collin was actually on the phone with Corporal Rentis, one of your supervisors, when you arrived on scene?
Yes, he was on the phone with Corporal Rentis, and then also I recall that once he was placed into a patrol vehicle, he was also on the phone with Corporal Rentis as well, as they had had previous interactions.
Right, so Collin is reaching out to describe to a law enforcement officer what just happened.
I don't know what his conversation with Corporal Rentis was, ma'am.
Did you interview Collin?
When you say interview, do you mean did I get a sworn statement from him?
Did you just ask him about what happened?
I had briefly talked to him, yes, initially.
And he told you that his mom punched him before he threw her off of him, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you and the other deputies who responded, it wasn't like you just went there, said, talk to you, everything matches, so we're arresting him. You were there for hours, right?
I don't recall exactly how long we were there, but it was not an in-and-out situation.
Right. And do you remember your supervisor on scene, Joella Moore, saying she never knows how to read Catherine Griffith?
I do not recall that statement.
But it's on body camera, right?
Okay.
Speaking of body camera footage, you had one on your person that night, correct?
Correct.
And it was running the whole time you were there?
Correct.
Have you reviewed it since you found out you were going to have to testify?
I reviewed it when I initially spoke with someone from the state's attorney's office.
Okay. So you interviewed Susan Detman, the grandmother, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you know that her statement did not exactly match what Kathy Griffith told you, right?
Their statements seem to coincide with each other and align.
That's what your opinion was, right?
That is basically what I wrote in my report, ma'am, yes.
Right. But what about what's on body camera footage?
That she had told me that they were having a conversation at the dinner table, and that Catherine told her son that she wanted to take away his Xbox and his cell phone so that she could only send and receive text messages and make phone calls, and that they had pretty much both decided that he wasn't going to go on their family vacation.
And then Susan also told you that as Kathy was reading him the riot act, that Collin stood up and said, let's do this.
Correct.
Right?
They both told me that.
Okay. But then Susan says she didn't see what happened next because she was going for her phone to call Corporal Rentis herself, right?
So Susan had pretty much told me that once he stood up and said, let's do this, that she stepped away to go and get her phone. And by the time she came back, they were on the floor. And the only thing that I have between that time period is both what Collin had told me he advised happened and then also what his mother had said.
Right, and Collin told you that his mother punched him in the face.
Correct. Collin had told me his mother had punched him in the face, but when we were on scene, I did not see any bruisings, marking, or swelling, or any indication that he had been struck in the face by any object.
It is possible to get punched and not have redness, swelling, bruising, correct?
I guess anything's possible, ma'am.
Right, you're not a doctor.
I am not, no.
So Susan did not tell you the same thing that Kathy did, because Kathy said, I never touched him. He's just being a brat because I took away his stuff, right?
Correct. The grandmother and mother had both pretty much told me... I'm sorry, ma'am, can you please rephrase the question?
My main point is that you made it sound like Kathy and Susan completely agreed on what happened, which would indicate to the jury that Susan supported what Kathy said about her not punching Collin. But Susan didn't tell you that, right?
Correct. Susan had told me that they initially got into an argument, and their statements were the same up until Collin got up and said, let's do this. At that point in time, the grandmother advised she was not present and did not see what happened from the time frame that he got up and said, let's do this, until she came back and they were already both on the floor.
Both on the floor. Now, Collin was quite forthcoming with you, right, when you talked to him, your interaction?
So I had talked to him initially, briefly, and then when I went to go and get a sworn statement from him, he advised that he wanted to speak
I'm going
to me.
to stop you right there. He was talking on the phone to Corporal Rentis the whole time he was sitting in the car, correct?
Correct. He was sitting in the back of the car.
And any time an officer walked up to him, they could capture his face and his voice and whatever he was saying on camera, right?
We had our body cameras on.
Right, so that's a yes?
Yes.
So Collin says his mom punched him, and he defended himself by kneeing her and throwing her to the ground, right?
That is what he had stated, yes.
And that's on body cam?
Yes.
Okay, and then Kathy says, I never punched him, right?
Correct.
And Susan says, I don't know what happened. She may have punched him because I wasn't there when that happened.
Correct.
Okay. You all chose to believe Kathy over Collin, correct?
Based on the evidence that we had seen to coincide with the two different stories and with what the grandmother had told us from the different points in time that she was there, it appeared that the mother and the grandmother had similar stories, or from what time periods they were both there together, that matched. And like I said, based on the physical evidence of injuries that the mother had and the son's lack thereof, that was where the evidence led us to go.
So your body cam would also show the alleged injuries to Kathy, right?
Yes.
And when you're, I know you were still in training, but I am sure you have learned, if not before then, that when there's a domestic incident and allegations from both sides about what may have happened, knowing the family history is important, correct?
The family dynamics between mother and son? Yes.
And maybe prior acts of violence on either side? Is that important to know too?
Towards each other?
Yeah, or towards anybody.
So once we had placed Collin under arrest, we did check to see if he had any previous arrests for domestic violence or battery, and we did not find anything.
Right, but you found some for Kathy, right?
For domestic violence?
Mm-hmm.
As the victim, I did not go into her background and check to see her criminal history, as she was a victim in this case.
So you weren't aware that she has been arrested for domestic violence battery on another family member before?
No, I'm not.
Would that have made a difference to you in how you approach this case?
No, ma'am, it would not.
And are you aware that...
Your Honor, I don't object to anything further about subject matter like that. It's irrelevant to what he's doing.
So are you aware that Kathy Griffith had been arrested before for stabbing her then husband?
No, I'm not.
Are you aware that she was also alleged to have burned him with a terrarium heat lamp in that same incident?
No, I'm not.
Are you aware that Kathy Griffith was on videotape shown to law enforcement and a DCF investigator driving her car and pinning her then husband to the house, between the car and the house, in front of her children?
I'm not aware of that, no.
So you're not aware that the incident where she stabbed her then husband and burned him with a lamp was also in front of her children?
No, I'm not. As I had said earlier, I have no previous interaction with either one of those individuals or knowledge about their previous history.
Are you aware that Kathy Griffith had threatened to kill multiple members of her then ex-husband's girlfriend?
I am not aware of that, no.
Are you aware that she was actually contacted by law enforcement on her way to their home in Homestead?
No, I'm not.
And you're not aware that she was on an audio recording saying she was going to kill all three of them?
I'm not aware of that, no.
With her gun?
I'm not aware.
Are you aware that she has pulled a gun and threatened Collin in the past?
No, ma'am, I'm not.
And that happened in Charlotte County just 2 months before this?
I'm not aware of that incident, nor did I have any involvement in that case.
And are you aware that Kathy Griffith had pulled a gun and threatened to kill her mother's husband?
No, I'm not.
Would any of those prior instances, if you had known of them at the time, would they have made a difference in how you treated this case?
So I would personally say no, they would not have made a difference to me because I would have gone into this case as it is a separate incident from things that happened previously. And in this case, you have to treat, in different cases or any case, you have to treat different, you can't take other instances into account into how you look into cases.
Collin was taken to jail that night, you said, right?
Yes.
And you claimed that, or you said that Kathy claimed she was afraid of him.
Yes, I did.
Are you aware that the very next morning, she insisted on taking him home with her, despite Collin saying, I'd rather stay in jail than go home with my mom because I'm afraid of what she'll do to me?
I was not on that call, nor was I aware that that call even came out.
I don't have any other questions.
Redirect.
Just read the
Deputy, are you aware that victims of domestic violence often want their abuser back in their lives?
Yes, that happens often. Usually with domestic violence, obviously it's going to be a family member, whether it's a spouse, child, or something like that. And people do have personal relationships, so after the fact, typically people want to try and reconcile issues and fix things.
Does that sometimes end up very badly for the victim being abused further?
It can, especially when it is situations where it's parents and children or husbands and wives. You'll see situations where you'll have multiple issues of domestic violence, but because it's a family member and someone that they love, it continues to happen and they stay with that person.
Does it also unfortunately end in family members murdering each other?
It can end in violence in that nature.
Now, the defense attorney was asking you a lot of the questions. Were you aware of things? Were you aware of things? Were you aware of things? Do you know if all or any of the information she was asking about is true or accurate, or what source it's from?
I have no idea of anything that she was asking me because I've had no other involvement with Collin or his mother. And as I had said, I treat that case as its own individual case, as it has no reference to other cases or instances that we've dealt with.
Now, the defense attorney was inquiring about you a lot about when she talked about Susan Detman, the grandmother, about the content of her statement.
Mm-hmm.
Is it accurate that Susan told you that her daughter was telling Collin that she would be implementing new parenting rules?
Yes, sir, that is accurate.
And the grandma told you that Collin would be having his Xbox gaming system, his cell phone, and other items taken away as a disciplinary action due to his behavior.
Yes, that is an accurate statement.
And these are things that Susan said the mother was saying to her son, correct?
Correct. These are things that the grandmother and both the mother had told me in their statements that she was going to take items away due to his behavior for parenting.
And they were so fed up with the defendant that they told him that the Thanksgiving cruise vacation he would no longer be going on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And at that time, according to the grandmother and Miss Kathy, the defendant's response was, Collin stood up and said, let's just do it.
Correct.
So did you take that to mean he was challenging his mom to a physical fight?
From both the statements that the grandmother and the mother had told me, yes, it sounded like he stood up and basically tried to show body language and intimidate his mother and say, okay, if you're going to try and take away my Xbox and my cell phone, then he wanted to have a physical interaction.
So because the mom was trying to discipline and parent her child, the defendant physically did what to his own mom?
So at that point, from basically what the mother had told me, is that he had kneed her in the stomach and thrown her to the ground, and when she went to go and get her cell phone, he stomped on her hand.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. The witness released.
He is, Your Honor.
Ms. Thornhill?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Members of the jury, it's about 10:20. We'll take our mid-morning recess of 15 minutes.
All rise, please. Be seated. You don't need to go to the
Anything we need to take out, Mr. Levine?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Thornhill or
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Hendry?
No, Your Honor.
All right. 15 minutes. Lawyers are present. State's counsel is present. Are we ready for the jury?
Oh, we just need a couple minutes here. There'll be one quick thing to litigate.
Okay.
Deputy Carrie Welsh with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. And I wanted to inquire from the court and ask permission for her to be able to say one of the things that she had mentioned before at the prior hearing we had. And that was the defendant telling her, as it pertains to the prior killing, he made a statement to her that when he was talking about killing his mom in the future, he mentioned that he's killed before and he could kill again. It would be my intention to ask Your Honor for her to be allowed to say that, as it would not be contrary to the court's ruling. She would not be saying, and she did not say that the defendant said that in the context of his dad, and she would not be able to say that anything about him killing his dad here at trial. But I would ask for permission to be able to ask that question. And I would say it would not run afoul of Your Honor's ruling and what has already come in regarding that killing.
And I would object to that, Judge. It implies something that it's a true statement if he acted in self-defense, right? But the statement alone, without getting into details such as it was self-defense, make it extremely prejudicial, and I think that the prejudicial effect of it would substantially outweigh any probative value. So it's a 403 argument.
Remind me what the context of this conversation was in which the statement was made. What was going on?
She was talking to him about, it was one of the times when he needed to be at home instead of somewhere else, and I don't remember which place it was, if it was the jail or the psychiatric facility or foster care, but it was him again saying, I don't want to go home with my mom, I'm afraid of what she might do, and I could hurt her. In response, basically, I've killed before and I know I could do it again. But once again, there's a whole host of interpretations that if it's allowed in, I would feel obligated to go into, that could mean self-defense too, correct? Which opens a can of worms.
Is it the fair characterization of the conversation that Mr. Griffith was talking about defending himself?
I believe so, yes.
I mean, the words themselves. I know there's been some
This
talk
was-
about I'm afraid of what she'll do and then what I'll do. Is it that sort of give and take that's going on there?
I believe so, yes. But I could be wrong. There was one deputy who testified, and it might have been Welch, who said that it was not a conditional statement.
That was Welch.
It was Welch?
Yes.
Okay, so I remembered it correctly.
When was our hearing? I have notes.
14th and 15th, I think, of January, or maybe the 13th and the 14th.
Yeah, I think it was the 14th and 15th.
All right, so my notes reflect this was the incident at Charlotte Behavioral Health when he was being released. And I don't have verbatim notes, but she testified that the CAD notes said that he didn't feel safe to go home. When the witness got to the facility, Mr. Griffith approached, said he didn't feel safe to go home or how he'd handle it. She said initially he didn't seem to meet criteria. She asked him why he didn't feel safe or how he didn't feel safe, and he said he would do something to his mother or grandmother. She asked him what he meant, and he said he would throw them out of the car or shoot or stab them. He said he's done it before and would do it again. Asked what he meant. He said he shot his dad, and he didn't want to go with either one of them. and then he was Baker acted again. So
The deputy knows that if Your Honor rules it admissible, she knows and understands that she will not mention that he killed his dad. I would ask Your Honor to allow me to ask that question, for her to answer that question, as it would be consistent with your ruling, and that's all I have to say.
Ms. Thornhill, anything additional?
Nothing additional. I have a transcript, so do you...
Yeah, I see that. I'm sure it's better than my notes.
Well, your notes sound pretty darn good. You're supposed to already be with me. It's not very long.
All right, so Ms. Thornhill, I recognize the statement can be interpreted multiple ways, but isn't that the point? I mean, it is a statement of future potential intent action that I think can be interpreted as self-defense, but it can be interpreted as not self-defense. Because nothing in there says anything directly about being afraid of his mother or his grandmother, because he speaks about his grandmother. It just says and specifically his statement is, I'm afraid of how I'll handle the situation. Not, I'm afraid of my mother, I'm afraid I'll be attacked and what I'll do in response. It's, I'm afraid of how I'll handle the situation if you send me home, which is probative on the issue of premeditation, intent, and so forth. So I am going to allow it. And it is out there that he's killed in the past.
Right,
So.
right. I understand. And let me ask you this then. Would I be running afoul or opening the door if I asked Deputy Welch about one possible interpretation of that is I've acted in self-defense before and I know I could do it again?
Opening the door to what?
To any of the Oklahoma stuff.
Mr. Levine, what's your position on that?
I think it would be opening the door, Your Honor.
I don't know why you would. I mean,
I don't think
that's a
it is.
question I think you would ask the jury during your closing argument. What does that mean? The witness's opinion of what that could mean is neither here nor there, is it?
I mean, we've had lots of opinions from officers about how they handle investigations and what's usual and things like that.
And the ones I've heard objected to have,
Yes.
if you notice, have been sustained.
Yes.
So.
That's fine. I won't go any further.
Right. I'm not saying it opens the door or what it might open the door to, but I just don't think it's relevant what they think that could mean.
Okay.
So.
And noted for future objections as well.
Now, sometimes those opinions might be admissible
I understand.
if it's within their area of expertise and it's relevant to an issue in the case, but much of what I've heard, well, all of what you've objected to, I've sustained.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, if I may have just a
So,
brief moment to...
let me ask a question, though.
Yes.
Well, you're going to tell her not to say anything about that it was the father or a relative. I mean,
Yes.
that was part of my order.
Yes, I've told her I'm going to tell her again based upon the court's ruling. It will be updated.
All right.
All right, thank you. Now I'll just take a minute because she's outside. All right, thank you, Your Honor. State's ready. For the record, I have advised the witness, Your Honor, she understands.
All right.
All right, please.
Be seated, please. Next witness, Mr. Levine.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Deputy Carrie Welch with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Carrie Welch.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good morning.
Good morning, Deputy Welch. May you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your name?
Yep, I'm Deputy Carrie Welch, K-E-R-I-W-E-L-C-H.
And where do you work?
The Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
Tell the jury about your education, training, and experience.
So I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 6 years. In that time, I do annual training with the Sheriff's Office, but I was also part of the mental health unit. So I did some crisis intervention training and extra training for de-escalation and things of that nature.
Now, I want to direct your attention to the defendant in this case. Did you have an opportunity to come in contact with the defendant, Collin Griffith, around September 19th of 2023?
Yes.
Describe to the jury how that came about.
So I was called to our Charlotte Behavioral Center, which is our Center for Crisis and Addiction Services. I was called there for the defendant being released from the facility, and they didn't feel that he was ready to be released. He was saying that he didn't want to go home.
What happened next when you arrived there?
When I arrived, I spoke with the defendant, and he made several statements about wanting to harm his mother and grandmother if he were to go back into their custody.
And those several statements that he made about harming his mom and grandmother, what specifically did he say?
He specifically said that he had, or something along the lines of that he had done it before and that he would do it again, and said that he would either push them out of a car, stab them, or shoot them.
Were you concerned when he said this?
Absolutely.
As a result of that, what did you do?
I placed him under a Baker Act for protective custody and sent him back to the facility.
And tell the jury a little bit about what does that mean, that you placed him under a Baker Act?
So Baker Act is for anyone that has mental illness or mental instability, someone that can cause harm to themselves or others.
Now, when the defendant mentioned those 3 different ways in which he could kill his grandma and or mom, and he said he's done it before, what was he referring to that he had done what before?
Yeah.
Do you need clarification?
Yes.
All right. Would you both approach, please? Mr. Levine, rephrase your question.
Thank you. Deputy Welch, when you said that the defendant said he had done it again, he had done it before and could do it again, was he specifically referring to he had killed before and could kill again?
Yes.
All right, I have no further questions.
Cross-exam?
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Back on September 19th, when you came into contact with Collin Griffith, that was at Charlotte Behavioral Health Center?
Yes.
And were you aware he had been in that facility under a Baker Act hold for several days leading up to your encounter with him?
I don't know how long, but he was in the facility prior, yes.
And are you aware of what caused him to be placed in that facility initially?
No.
Collin told you multiple times that he didn't feel safe going home, correct?
Correct.
And when he said, I don't feel safe at home, you all kept saying, well, if you don't give me something specific, you're going to go home. I mean, he wanted to stay in the Baker Act facility, right?
Yes, he didn't feel safe. Correct.
And Sergeant Schneider was there with you?
No.
At some point? No? This is separate from Sergeant Schneider? What time, if you know, was Collin supposed to be released from the Baker Act facility to go home with his mom?
I don't recall.
Okay. Is it safe to say that you responded to the facility hours after his release was supposed to happen?
I don't recall.
Do you remember going there at one point, finding that he didn't meet criteria to be re-Baker Acted, and then having to go back at another point?
No.
No? Okay. There's some times on your reports that indicates you responded at both 6 and at midnight. Did I misread that?
Yeah, I don't recall going twice, just once.
Do you have your report in front of you?
I do not.
Is it possible you went more than once?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So Collin is saying, I want to stay here, I don't want to go home, I don't feel safe at home, I don't feel safe at home, I don't feel safe at home, because he said it multiple times, right?
Correct.
And y'all kept saying, you gotta go home, because you didn't think he met the criteria to be re-Baker Acted, right?
Correct.
And then finally he said the magic words that got him re-Baker Acted, right?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, once he said, I'm afraid I'll hurt or kill my mom or my grandma, you guys immediately put him back in the facility, right?
Absolutely, it's a homicidal statement.
Right, and that appeared to be his goal the whole time, was to get put back in the facility rather than going home with mom or grandma.
I don't know what his intention was.
1 second. Thank you.
You redirect.
Briefly.
Deputy Welch, is it a fair statement that the defendant, in reference to killing his mom or his grandma, said, "I will kill my mom"?
Yes,
So it wasn't dependent on anything, it was, "I will kill my mom"?
that's correct.
And when you asked him how that would happen, his response was throw them out of the car, shoot, or stab?
Yes.
And is that when he said that he killed before and could kill again?
Yes.
All right, I have nothing further.
Is this witness released?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Thornhill?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness.
The state will call Detective Lacey Zeno-Niani with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
Ready to raise your right hand this morning by the vote?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony given in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes.
Okay, watch your step. Good morning.
Good morning.
Detective, if you could introduce yourself to the jury.
Good morning. My name is Lacey Ziniani, juvenile detective with Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
Could you spell your name for the record?
Zenioniani.
And how long have you been employed in law enforcement?
I've been employed in law enforcement for 5 years.
Tell the jury about your training and experience.
My training and experience started on road patrol for my first 3 years, and I have currently been in this position for 2.
And the position you're in as a juvenile detective, what does that mean?
So my position focuses on juvenile intervention and working with the youth within our county. My unit focuses on working with juveniles who are at risk. I also monitor our juveniles who are on probation and try to lead them into a successful pathway, as well as working with our runaways and just any juvenile who is experiencing issues or trouble at home.
How did you come in contact with the defendant, Collin Griffith?
I came into contact with the defendant after the initial incident that occurred. It was forwarded to me for intervention purposes.
And what were your goals then when you got involved in the defendant's life?
Our goals were to implement intervention and work with the family to assist them with resources and guide them to a successful pathway.
Would you have interaction with not only the defendant but also his mom, Kathy Griffith?
Yes.
Did you have any interaction with the defendant's grandmother, Susan Detman?
Yes.
And was that both in person and on the phone?
Yes.
Describe to the jury the accessibility part of your relationship to the mom and the defendant.
So I spoke with the mom and the defendant very often. My role was to be available to them, again, for resources, so we would sometimes speak daily, sometimes speak multiple times a day. Whenever they needed to call, I was there to answer and assist with whatever they needed.
On the day that Kathy Griffith died, did she contact you or try to contact you?
I had yes, prior to she contacted me via phone.
And was that a text message or a phone call, do you recall?
It would have been both.
And you responded to her at some point on that same day?
Yes.
Was she alive to answer that phone call?
Yes.
Or, did she answer that phone call?
Yes.
Towards the end of the day, did you ever call or text her and she didn't respond to you?
Yes.
All right. Now, can you give us kind of like a time frame, the general month and year to the general month and year of when you would have been in the defendant and his mom's life?
Roughly, we began intervention back in September of 23, and that would have ended September of 24, I believe.
Did the defendant ever make statements to you or in your presence that concern you about the violence he wanted to inflict upon his mom?
Yes.
And what do you remember him saying?
I don't recall specifics, but there were comments that if he returned home or back into the residence with his mom, that he wouldn't be able to control what had happened or that he would harm her.
When you say he wouldn't be able to control what would happen, do you mean how he would act?
Yes.
Did he say anything more than harm her? In terms of, did he say he would hurt her or kill her or anything specific?
There were comments that he would kill her.
And did he say to you or in your presence on more than one occasion that he would kill her?
Yes.
And did he make those statements that he would kill his mom on different dates?
Yes.
What type of time period do you think he made those statements in terms of how many days, weeks, or months of a time period did he repeatedly say he would kill his mom?
I don't know any specifics, but it was often that the comments were made.
It was the defendant made those statements often?
Yes.
And when he would make those statements, what would be your response?
We would just try to work through with him and mentor him about the opportunities that he had for his future and how to work through the situations at hand and the consequences that would result from those comments.
Did it appear that he would get angry when mom would try to take away his video games and cell phone and things of that nature?
Yes.
Was that a reoccurring source of discontent on the defendant's part?
Yes.
Now, besides providing help to Collin and attention to Collin Griffith, did you also provide that to his mom, Kathy Griffith?
Yes, we did.
Was she receptive to doing what you told her to do?
In the beginning, she would act like she was receptive, but would go against what was being discussed.
And would she basically give in to cater to the defendant's desires?
Yes.
Do you think she was would give in too much and be too soft on him at times?
At times, yes.
Now, from those many months that you interacted with the family, was it clear to you that she loved Collin and wanted him to be around her?
Yes.
Did she understand the danger to her life having the defendant around her?
Yes.
Did she know that he had explicitly said he would kill her?
Yes, she made a comment to me that she was willing to accept her fate if that gave her more time with her son.
Meaning she was willing to die die at the hands of the defendant as long as she had more time to spend with him?
Yes.
Now, getting to know the family a little bit, did you become aware that there were also good times between the defendant and his mom?
Yes, the family frequently went on vacations such as Disney cruises. They went on multiple cruises together and other family trips.
Would they both tell you about going to the movies or having movie passes to be able to go to the movies together?
They thoroughly enjoyed going to the movies together.
Whatever flaws Kathy might have had, was she trying to be a good mom?
I believe at the time she was doing her best, yes.
From your observations over that many-month period, did the defendant have respect for his mom and her rules?
No.
All right, Detective, I don't have any further questions for you.
Cross.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Detective Zanoniani, you talked a little bit about your role in the juvenile division. It's sort of a special role in the sheriff's office, isn't it?
Yes.
Because you're doing your best to intervene to help families make it through a difficult adolescent period often.
Yes.
And the resources that you provide, which is your job, right, is for both parents and the kids.
Yes.
So it's not limited to just the kids or just the parents.
Well, it mainly focuses on the juvenile itself, but taking it an extra step further to make sure the parents have what they need to follow through thoroughly, yes.
And sometimes problems that children appear to have are related to their parents or how they were parented.
Yes.
Is that fair? Obviously, you got to know Kathy and Collin Griffith pretty well here over the year that you were involved. right?
Yes.
Sorry, you need to answer out loud so the court reporter
Yes.
can take it down. Did you also get to know Susan Detman?
Yes.
And as part of your job in getting to know the family and the dynamics, because that's important too, right?
Yes.
You came to learn quite a bit about everyone's background, right?
Yes.
Okay, especially Kathy.
Yes.
And did you actually seek out information about Kathy's past in your efforts to provide resources to both her and to Collin?
In the beginning, yes.
So you became aware of some prior involvement that Kathy had with DCF, right?
Yes.
And it's fair to say that in most, if not all of those prior DCF involvements, it involved Kathy being violent or aggressive towards other family members.
Yes.
And many of her actions that caused DCF to become involved were committed in front of her children.
Most of them that I recall, yes.
And in fact, her kids were taken away from her, were sheltered from her at times, correct?
I don't recall those specifics, but...
Would it surprise you?
No.
And you're also aware that Kathy had been arrested before?
Yes.
Specifically for an incident that involved her stabbing her then husband in front of 10-year-old Collin.
Yes.
And also, there were other instances where Kathy committed violence upon her then husband in front of the children.
Yes.
Okay. So you're aware of the car pinning incident, which I call
Yes.
it, where she drives her car and pins her then husband to the house with her car still running. He can't escape, right?
Yes.
And her older son, Christopher, had to go and yell and beat on the car and try to get a baseball bat to break through the windows to finally get his mom to release her then husband from...
I don't recall those very specifics, but I do recall minor details of the report, yes.
And you're also aware that Kathy Griffith had... Well, let me say it this way. The Charlotte County Sheriff's Office responded a lot to Kathy's home. Is that fair?
Yes.
And one of those times involved... Didn't actually happen at her home, but she had threatened to kill her then ex-husband's girlfriend's family. Are you aware of that?
I don't recall specifics on those details.
Okay, so you don't recall a Charlotte County Sheriff's deputy contacting her and getting her, trying to convince her to turn around from going to Homestead to kill the 3 members of the family?
I don't recall that, no.
What about an incident when Kathy claimed that someone had committed a crime upon her and called law enforcement? Are you aware of any of those instances?
Yes.
Okay. So, for example, you're aware that Kathy claimed that her then husband's paramour had strangled Kathy, and that she had video proof of this woman strangling her.
I believe I recall something similar, but again, I don't recall specific details on those.
But the takeaway from all that is that Kathy called police claiming that she had been strangled by someone else, but the video proof she had was clear that it was Kathy strangling herself. Do you remember that?
I don't recall that.
Would you say that Kathy, in your interactions with her, definitely wanted her things to go her way, or she was not going to have it?
Yes.
Okay. So sort of her way or the highway?
Yes.
It's also fair to say that she really, really, really wanted Collin to stay with her.
Yes.
She knew that Collin did not want to live with her, correct?
Yes.
She knew that he had said he didn't feel safe with her, right?
Yes.
And she still wanted him there at all costs.
Yes.
Even despite the things that you all told her he said.
Yes.
In your opinion, as somebody who provides intervention for families either in turmoil or distress, or if there's been an arrest, do you think it was a good idea for Collin and Kathy to live together?
We did everything we could as far as intervention purposes, working alongside of our mental health unit and with DCF, and that was the decision that was made.
Who made it?
DCF returned him back to his home. We had resources we could implement in the time being to help guide them, I can't speak on who made it specifically.
But your personal opinion.
I'm confident that we did everything we could. I don't know that I feel comfortable giving my
If it
personal
had been your
opinion.
decision, you would not have
Yes.
allowed them to live together, correct?
Correct.
For both of their safety.
Yes.
Including Collin's safety from what Kathy might do to him.
Both.
Yes. And sort of along that same vein, Kathy, in just the year that you knew her, was suicidal several times.
There were several suicide incidences, yes.
So when you say instances, it's not just her saying she's suicidal. She actually attempted suicide several times that you are personally aware of.
Yes.
So overdosing on oxycodone, for example.
Yes.
Mixing it with alcohol.
Yes.
Are you aware of a time when she had a gun in her hand but had become so incoherent from the pills that she luckily didn't?
Yes.
She even posted things sometimes about wanting to kill herself.
I
aware of that?
I never had access and or viewed her social media accounts to answer that.
But safe to say that at times she really wanted to die.
Yes.
And went beyond just saying it, but actually tried to.
Yes.
On September 11th or 12th of 2023, so right when you first became involved with Collin and Kathy, did you speak with Collin about why you had gotten involved? About why the sheriff's office was, talking to them?
Yes.
Okay. And he told you that time that his mom had pulled a gun on him, right?
Yes.
And that she had pointed at him and threatened to shoot him?
Yes.
Or herself, or both?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he gave you a lot of details about what all she said to him.
He gave a lot of details to the initial responding deputies who took the report, who would have had everything. I followed up the next day for intervention purposes, not mainly focusing on that, but figuring out how we can help them moving forward.
And, I mean, what he said happened is not unfathomable given Kathy's past, right?
No.
And you're aware that Kathy actually had a gun in her home at that time?
Based on the information of the initial call, it was assumed there was a gun in the home, but she denied it being in there. There was no way for us to prove if it was in the home or not.
But you found out later that there had been a gun in the home, right?
Several months later, yes.
Yeah. And so she lied to you about that?
Yes.
And she convinced everybody that she had never done such a thing, right?
Yes.
Are you aware that she actually admitted to her own mother that she had pulled a gun on Collin?
No.
When you first became involved with Collin and Kathy, Collin was in the Baker Act facility, right?
Yes.
And Kathy was not being cooperative with the efforts that everybody was making to make sure that she was safe, that Collin was safe, that things were being done to make sure nothing bad happened to either one of them,
Yes.
right? So, for instance, she wouldn't sign medical release forms for people to be able to communicate about Collin's treatment if any was needed.
That's correct.
And when when Charlotte Behavioral Health Center wanted her permission to try some different medications with Collin, she refused, right?
Yes.
And at that point, he was only 16, right?
Yes.
So she had to make those decisions for him.
Yes.
And in fact, she was so desperate to have Collin back with her, despite everything that happened, that she hired a lawyer to get him released from Charlotte Behavioral Health, right?
Yes.
And that actually happened.
Yes.
But Collin kept saying, I don't feel safe going home. I'm afraid of what she might do to me and then what I'll do in response.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. And then another time, I think it was part of that same episode, Collin actually got placed into a place called Sandy Pines.
Yes.
And what do you know about Sandy Pines?
Sandy Pines is a residential facility on the other coast. Usually your local mental health facility will complete a packet. Our mental health team would be able to answer this a little bit better than I can. But they go through a formal process and send them away to this residential facility to obtain help.
Okay. And your understanding of it is that it's a 60 to 90 day program?
Yes.
And that's designed to get the maximum benefit from
Yes.
it, correct? as opposed to, say, Charlotte Behavioral Health and Baker Act, which is usually just a few days to get someone past whatever acute problem they're having.
Correct.
Kathy checked Collin out of Sandy Pines after 3 days, right?
It was very quickly, yes.
And against medical advice, right?
Yes.
And against your advice?
Against all of our advice, yes.
Everyone's advice.
Yes.
All right, so you're checking in regularly with the family on November 12th of 2023, so the night that Collin was arrested for battering his mom. Well, actually, this is the day before. I apologize. There might have been some contact between either you or Corporal Rentis, who is somebody you work with in the juvenile division,
Yes.
right? Okay. Corporal Rentis was also very involved with Collin and Kathy,
Yes.
right? In fact, I think you may have told me on another occasion that you had a really close relationship with Kathy in terms of you communicated more often with her, but Collin and Corporal Rentis would communicate most often.
Yes.
So Collin would reach out to Corporal Rentis more often than he reached out to you.
Yes.
But he did reach out to you sometimes.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought I heard something. So on November 12th, so the day before he got arrested, did you have any communication with either Kathy or Collin when he called Rentis and said, I don't feel safe at my home anymore, my mom kicked me out, but now she's calling me a runaway, I don't feel safe with her because she had a gun and she threatened me before?
I don't recall specifics of our phone call because, again, we spoke almost daily, if not every other day, but they would reach out when things would escalate so that we could try to guide them through the process.
Okay, but that particular, you do remember an incident shortly before Collin was arrested for domestic violence battery where his mom kicked him out.
Yes.
And he said then when she started calling him a runaway, he didn't feel safe going back home because of the gun incident, and law enforcement got involved that day as well.
Yes.
And nobody checked for a gun that day either, right?
I can't speak for who was there.
Okay. But you are aware that Collin actually went with Susan that night.
Yes.
To her house in, I think to her Auburndale house.
Yes.
Okay. And was the recommendation at that point for Collin to stay with Susan for some length of time, or was it kind of up in the air?
He had a good relationship with his grandma, so she was a good divider between the two to keep them separated, so we were just trying to keep them separate for a couple of days until things de-escalated.
Are you aware that Kathy demanded that Susan bring Collin home immediately the next day?
Yes.
On the 13th? Yeah. And were you involved in any of the discussions about that?
I recall speaking with Catherine and advising her to let them stay separate for a couple of days.
But she insisted that Collin
Yes.
be brought back to her home?
Yes.
Are you also aware that she punished Collin for not coming home quickly enough?
I don't recall specific punishment other than taking his gaming equipment away, if that's what you're referring to.
What about corporal punishment? Are you aware of any corporal punishment she inflicted on him?
No.
Really? So not a belt whipping incident?
I don't recall a belt whipping incident.
And speaking of that, if Kathy claimed to Susan, who witnessed the belt whipping, that when Susan said, hey, don't do that, and Kathy said, no, it's okay, Rentis told me I could do it, would that be something you would expect Corporal
That's not
Rentis
something
to...
Corporal Rentis would say.
It's not something he would say?
No.
Okay, so if Kathy said that to Susan, she would have been making it up.
Yes.
Then on the 13th, we know Collin is arrested for the domestic violence battery. And he said that his mom had punched him, and in response to that he kneed her and threw her off of him.
Yes.
Yep. And given Kathy's history, that's not, once again, unfathomable, is it?
No.
On the 14th of November, so the day that Collin got released from the jail, you're aware that he told jail personnel, I don't want to go home with my mom. Please don't make me go home with my mom. I don't feel safe with my mom. I'm afraid of what she'll do to me and then what I'll do in response.
I wasn't there for that specific situation, so I can't really speak on their behalf.
Are you at least aware that it occurred?
Yeah.
And jail personnel made him go home with his mom?
At the time, again, I wasn't there, so I can't speak on that behalf of what happened there.
Well, Collin's at home with mom when Charlotte County Sheriff's deputies have to respond to the home because the jail, I think, realized maybe that wasn't such a good idea to make him go home with mom and asked them to go check. Were you a part of that?
No.
Going to check? Were you aware of it at any way?
Not at the time. Not at the exact time, no.
But you found out about it later?
Yes.
And you're aware that as soon as the sheriff's deputies get there, that Collin is doing standing marches right in front of Kathy, holding weights above his head.
I remember a comment being made about it, but again, I wasn't there during that specific time.
Did you ever speak with any of the deputies who responded to the house that day?
No.
No? Okay. At any rate, you're aware that Collin ended up being Baker acted again on the 14th because he said, I'm afraid of what my mom will do to me if she comes at me, if she abuses me, if she attacks me, I will defend myself. And I may hurt her. Okay. That same day, I know you're aware of this because you actually, I think, made the call. Kathy overdosed on medicine, right?
Yes.
Okay, so she ended up in a Baker Act facility on November 14th, 2023.
Yes.
Over the next few months, you're aware of the ups and downs between Kathy and Collin, right?
Yes.
And they went back and forth with who would be taking care of him, to the point where eventually Collin's lawyer, you know who Jeff Ratkin is, right?
Yes.
That was Collin's lawyer for the domestic violence battery.
Yes.
Actually, let me back up then. So on the domestic violence battery charge, it seems that Kathy was a little inconsistent in what she wanted to see happen with that charge. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So sometimes she wanted the book thrown at him, take him away, lock him up, whatever. But then other times she wanted the charges dropped completely.
Yes.
Okay. And it wasn't always predictable what she would want.
Correct.
More suicide attempts throughout the next few months on Kathy's behalf, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, she got Baker acted several times, overdosed more than once.
More than once, yes.
Okay. So during this time, Mr. Ratkin is representing Collin in the domestic violence battery case, and eventually Collin gets put on probation. But that's not until several months later, right?
Yes.
Okay. But in the meantime, as Kathy's not sure what she wants to happen, you're aware that both Kathy and Susan signed an agreement to have concurrent custody of Collin, right?
Yes.
And that's called the 751 plan?
Yes.
So both people who are taking on the responsibility or the duty of caring for a child have to sign in front of a notary for that to happen, right?
Yes.
And they have to file the paperwork with the court system.
Yes.
And then eventually a judge either agrees with it and signs an order or says, no, I don't agree with the concurrent custody plan.
Yes.
In this particular case, you're aware that a judge did sign off on the concurrent custody agreement.
Yes.
So that meant that both Susan and Kathy at any time could be caring for Collin, and it would be legal.
Yes.
They could each make medical decisions for him at any time.
Yes.
And enroll him in school, things like
Yes.
that. And neither one needed the permission of the other to do any of those things.
Correct.
So DCF got involved again in February of 2024. You know what incident I'm talking about?
Can you specify?
Well, it's the time when they actually found a gun in the home, the gun that Kathy claimed wasn't there, and DCF got called out, and Kathy actually claimed that Collin had attacked her and battered her again. Does that incident sound familiar?
I don't recall very specifics. She may have told DCF that, or admitted to DCF at the time that she had a gun in the home, but I wasn't there, so I don't remember specifics.
Actually, I thought maybe you were there. Didn't you find a gun at your home one time?
After the fact, yes.
After what fact?
After working with him for a while, she admitted and willingly gave us the gun to hold into our evidence for everybody's safety.
And when was that?
I don't recall.
Okay.
Specifics.
But after she'd told you that she didn't have a gun in the home, you
Yes.
went and actually retrieved one?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And you have no idea if she bought another gun or had another gun or...
No, I mean, I can't speak on what she did.
Okay.
Behind closed doors.
So I'm talking about the incident where Kathy claimed that Collin had battered her. She called law enforcement and tried to get him arrested.
Okay.
And the deputies looked at ring video from the home and determined that that did not happen. Are you aware of that?
Briefly, yes.
Okay. And that DCF thought that Collin should stay with Susan or someone else for a while.
Yes.
But Kathy wouldn't allow it.
Correct.
Once again.
Correct.
Okay. Are you aware of any other times when Kathy made false allegations?
I mean, she made false allegations on multiple occasions, but unless you ask specifically, I don't recall.
Okay.
Like, what are you referring
No,
to?
it's okay. I think you've given the jury a good idea of how trustworthy she was, which is not very, correct?
At times, no.
Would you say that she was erratic in your experience with her?
I would say she was very undecisive.
So erratic is not a word you'd use. Well, what about the kicking Collin out and then turning around and calling him a runaway because she kicked him out? That's pretty erratic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and she did that more than once, right?
Yes.
Including when she knew she had kicked him out and he was with Susan.
Yes.
She'd call him a runaway and...
Yes.
Okay. Would you say she was unpredictable?
Yes.
How about manipulative?
Yes.
She manipulated you or tried to manipulate you and other law enforcement officers, right?
I believe they both were, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough. What about sort of self-sabotaging in terms of what she wanted and how to accomplish that? Yes?
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about Collin's probation terms. So far as you know, he was complying with his probation terms, right?
He was compliant with probation, yes.
And those probation terms also allowed him to go out of county to stay with Susan, right?
Yes.
Okay, there wasn't any requirement beyond that other than letting his probation officer know that he was going there, right?
Correct.
And his probation officer was Monique?
Yes.
In all the time that you dealt with Collin and Kathy, Collin basically told you he would rather be in jail than with his mom, right?
He made a comment.
What about that he'd rather stay in a psychiatric facility than go home with his mom?
There was a comment made previously, yes.
And he also has said he'd rather be in foster care than with his mom.
Yes.
Okay. And that's because he felt unsafe with her?
That is because he felt unsafe and they just did not get along. They
Right.
didn't agree or respect each other.
Okay.